All right, good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our first of our weekly 9 Principles virtual webinars. I believe that we have Dr. Janet Pilcher on the webinar, so I want to go ahead and introduce her and see. Janet, can you hear me and can we hear you?
Yes, can you hear me? I'm
Wonderful.
on. All
I
right,
can.
great to be with you. So great, Mandy, thanks for providing the introduction to Slido, and I'd like to get started, and we'll go to the agenda slide as the next slide and hope you all have an opportunity to get hooked in. I'm Janet Pilcher. I lead student education. I've been in leadership most of my life and know probably many of you on our webinar today. And if I don't know you, look forward to the opportunity to do that at some point. So I started out as in higher ed for the most part. Spent 20 years and a dean of a college there in healthcare and education, social work, some of the professional programs at the college, and then moved into an executive level position running an institute, and moved to student education about 10 years ago and came over to help start the education division that was an extension of our healthcare work across the United States and across the world. And so hope I have some healthcare colleagues on as well today. So it's great to be with you all. We're going to look at the structure of the agenda. We're going to talk a lot about today is structure and how important that structure is for our virtual environments and the way that we engage with each other. I'm going to dig down a little bit deeper into two items, the daily meeting huddles and our increased connections with our direct reports. And we'll leave a little time for questions and answers questions that you may have, and maybe answers that I can provide some help with you all. So glad to have you on. So let's start with our first poll. So if you would take a few minutes and answer this question: how would you rate your team's ability to make connections? Take a few minutes.
And Janet,
yes,
we have about 61 responses already to this.
Oh my gosh!
one.
Okay.
So look, I know it's looking good. We're looking at people rate their teams around a 4 to 5. We got 48% looking at a 4, 39% at about a 5. It looks like we do have some team members that look like they need a little bit more strength in their ability to make connections. We've got some 3s and 2s as well.
Great. So that's I think we have people, we talk a lot about connections. So if we'll shift to as we move to the next slide, let's talk about that a little bit more, and how we do our virtual work. And as you all know, we've all experienced moving from one workplace to another type of work environment, and that environment has helped us become more structured, and really what we're trying to do is to continue doing the routines that we've always done, and really strengthening those routines to almost what I call rituals. One of the things I think about when I was coaching tennis, one of the things that we would do as a team is we would come out and we had very specific goals that we would achieve at the very beginning. We had very specific goals and actions. And when we came out onto the courts every day, we knew for the first 10 or 15 minutes what we were going to do. And if it didn't matter if I was on the court with the team or not, they knew very specifically what their job and their task was to create those great fundamentals of what they needed to do each and every day in order to be a good tennis player. And that's really what we're talking about, is how do we, in this virtual environment, begin to set those routines that become our rituals. And I think for me, what I've had to learn over the years is that we just simply don't want to overcomplicate those. When our routines become so complicated that we forget our routines, and it's very difficult for those to become rituals of the work that we do every day. So just think in terms of making your routines so solid that we build rituals within our workplace every day. And why? Because when we do that, we're able to create meaningful opportunities for creating good decisions, and it's important to engage our team each and every day, and it gives us pride in the work that we do. So let's look a little bit deeper then into, as we move to the next slide, how we begin to make those touch points and connect with people. So what specifically do we do to create those routines? First of all, I know we're all experiencing, just new technology tools, some that we've been working on somewhat, but I can tell you in a matter of a week, I've become so much more skilled, probably like you, in using some of the technology tools like Teams and Slack and Google Hangout, and really beginning to build that collaborative work environment using the technologies that we have, and really looking at people face to face and building those interactions with them. And so what I want to talk about it with you today and continue to get your feedback and questions is I'm going to dig deeper into 2 of 3 touch points to hardwire. I'm going to dig deeper into daily huddles, and I'm going to dig deeper into one-on-ones. But I also don't want to forget that we have always had weekly team meetings or normal meetings that we have with our teams. And I think the key for me in learning how to work this past week very specifically, we got to keep doing those things. Just keep doing what we've normally done. And it also has helped me become better at building more engagement in those teams in that virtual environment. So as we're creating the agenda, we're creating an agenda that helps us build and execute to our plan. And also we need those meetings where we have opportunities to have ideas. So let's shift to the next Slido poll. And as we begin to dig deeper into the daily huddles, let's talk about and answer this question. Does your team have a formal structure for staying connected virtually? Take a few minutes and answer that question. And Mandy, feed me, what our respondents are saying.
We still got them coming in. Right now we're at about a 70% yes, 30% not yet. And it's staying about even, right? It's staying about even right there, anywhere from like 60 to 70% that do have a formal structure. And it's a good percentage of those that are still looking to kind of create one as well.
Okay. All right, good. All right, so let's dig a little bit deeper into daily huddles. So I'm going to, again, talk a little bit about daily huddles, talk about one-on-ones, and as you're creating your team meetings, you're continuing to do that with building better engagement. So a couple of things about daily huddles. So what are we trying to do with daily huddles? And we're doing these now more than we ever have. Based on our virtual environment. So some of the things that we're talking about, we're doing more of it instead of less of it. So our daily huddles are really 15, 20, no more than 30 minutes of just connecting with our teams each and every day. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, why do we do that? Because we want to increase team productivity, accountability, and continue to build morale. We want to allow ourselves again to see each other. And just a couple of suggestions, we can record those, we can take notes, and we need to follow up where needed, and then connect the dots day to day. So just the thinking about what do we do to set up those daily huddles so we can just do those touch points with our teams each and every day. So as I go to the next slide, I'm going to show an agenda that we're using. You're going to create your own agenda, and you can find other templates out there. But this is the agenda that we've started to use that's really beginning to work for us very well. So in our daily huddle agenda, we start with greetings, welcome, and roll call. In other words, our roll call is just simply looking at each other online. And it's just wonderful to be able to see each other, because we don't get to see each other in the office like we used to. We always start with a win. And in most everything that we taught, and most of you who know us, we always ask people, start with the win. So we use some type of format, 1 minute or 2 minutes, where we start with the win for the day. There are a couple of minutes where we have time for announcements. I may have a couple of announcements based on where we are right now in the crisis situation that we're in across the country, and ways that we're trying to build solutions to problems. And there may be some announcements related to that. So just if there are time, that just a little time for those announcements, or some others on your team may have some important announcements. But the bulk of the meeting is really in the discussion and the actions of the day. So about 10-15 minutes around giving some of your core team leaders an opportunity to answer these 3 questions. What's up in the next 24 hours? What's up? What are the key activities, the meetings and decisions that we're going to be making as a team in the next 24 hours? How are we doing on daily metrics? Are there things that we're tracking every day that we need to keep up with? And how are we doing? And then most important is, where are we stuck? Are we stuck anywhere? And if we're stuck somewhere, this is not the time that we're going to solve the problem, but it's the time to identify where we're stuck, so that we can come back with another touch point to determine how we begin to solve for places that we're stuck. And then we wrap up and follow up and make sure that we connect the dots back to why we're doing what we're doing each and every day. So that's one tactic, a daily huddle, a team touch point, really bringing people together, looking at them, giving them an opportunity to really focus on what the day's work is going to be. And if we're stuck, how do we get unstuck? And how do we make sure we follow up to address those concerns? So that's one tactic that you could easily put in place that I've found extremely valuable to our team. So we're going to shift now to really looking at then how do we have one-on-one interaction? So let's answer this question. How often do you connect with your supervisor? So take a few minutes and just answer that question. How often do you connect with your supervisor? We've talked about team huddles. Now we're really talking about your one-on-ones with your supervisor.
And we have a lot of daily and weekly connections. So people already practicing those continuous connections with their supervisors on mostly 64% are saying daily.
Oh, that's great, Mandy. Okay, so we've got a great start. So let's talk a little bit about structure and connection with our supervisors. So let's shift to as we shift to the next slide. Let's look at the concept that if those of you who are partners with us or know this work well, you know this term leader rounding. And really, when we talk about leader rounding, we're talking about how we as leaders connect to the people that we supervise each and every day. And so why do we do that? We do that because we want to express concern, celebrate accomplishment, identify barriers, and harvest wins. And it's more important than ever to build that connection. And so some people always ask me, how often should we round? And we get that question even when we're not in the situation that we're in now. But based on working in a virtual setting and our inability to see each other in ways that we normally see each other, it's more important than ever, and we should probably do it more than we normally do in doing the leader rounding or the personal connection. So what does that look like? So as we go to the next slide, I'll just talk a little bit more about what that looks like. On the left-hand side, as we think about where we are right now in what we're living, it's so important to make that personal connection with the people we supervise. We want to know how they're doing, how their families are doing, what their situations are. We want to recognize them and recognize that work is different, and we want to reassure them that we're all in this together, working collectively to do the best work that we can. As I look at the normal questions that we ask, they're really not that different in the questions that we ask in leader rounding and what we teach. But I want to just think for a few minutes about, I think about my mom. And one of the things that has occurred, my mom and dad are in their 80s, and I haven't seen them. I talk to them every day. They live in the place where I live, and I haven't seen them in over a week because I'm kind of quarantining myself for about 14 days just because I traveled a lot, and I just don't want to cause harm to them. So I'm staying away from them, but staying connected to them on the phone. And their life has changed because they're very social. And so what I've found with my mom in the morning is, you know, just following the rounding process to make that personal connection with her, and asking her things like, what's going well, or, you know, what did you do that yesterday that you really liked doing, and how did that feel for you? And if, is there something that really is getting in your way or that's stressing you out as you're having to make the transitions in your life, and what can I do to be helpful to you? And then I always ask her, because she has so many friends and they see each other a lot, but they're not able to see each other right now. And so what I'm finding myself ask her is, you know, who have you been able to connect with today? And so she's learned to use FaceTime on her phone so that she can see her friends, and in times that she can't spend that personal time with them. So as we think just about how we transfer what's personally meaningful to us, those are the things that are meaning to us in our work environment as well. And so if you can, I think I've learned, if I can just keep that in mind, as I'm working with the people who report to me and our team, then we'll all have care and concern for each other and ask those questions in the most sincere way, so that we can be helpful to each other to do the best work that we can possibly do. I'm really fortunate to have a great team that is working with me and the work that they do every day, and I know you are too. And so these today, I just wanted to give you a couple of tactics that we've learned very quickly over the last week that have been very helpful to us. I hope they're helpful to you. And I'd like to spend the last few minutes just answering questions that you might have as you pose those to the group through the technology that you have. So Mandy, I'll turn to you to see if there are any questions that people have or comments that I can address.
We already have a couple while they're coming in and people are kind of getting situated. We do have a couple. We have one from Melissa. How do you keep a huddle brief?
Yeah.
And is it appropriate for 45 to 50 staff members? You'll probably knock those out at the same time.
Yeah. So it's probably difficult to keep it brief for 45 or 50 staff members. So your huddles are probably going to be with your smaller teams. And I think as a leader, you have to figure out what you can manage. So you might have sub huddles or sub team huddles. And I think it's really important to keep your huddles at 30 minutes or less, probably preferably 20 minutes. And to keep them brief, is it really is very structured, very specific agenda, building that routine that I talked about and making sure you follow that routine. Sometimes people want to contribute, and that's okay, but that contribution is then taken to another platform or another meeting. It's not ignoring it, but it's taking the problem-solving approach to another meeting and making sure that we don't allow that type of conversation to disrupt that huddle.
I have a question here. Instead of daily huddles, what about weekly huddles?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to, I think you're going to do whatever works for you. I'm going to go back to how significant the daily huddle has been for us as a team this past week. And I'm going to go back to the concept of routine. And if it's not a daily huddle, I go back to my coaching days again. When we know that we're going to wake up every day and we're going to have a very specific focused time that we're going to, for 20 minutes a day, that we're going to do something specific that builds routine and structure into our day, and we know we can count on that, that helps us build that engagement, but it also helps reduce anxiety and helps people understand how we're building alignment and interconnection of work together. So if it's a weekly huddle and you think you can get that same outcome, that's probably up to you. I'm just going to go back to that concept of routine to ritual. And by building that ritual, we become very, very focused on how we function as a team and building that collective connection with each other.
Awesome, thank you. There is a question about, a couple of people have liked the question about if we'd share the PowerPoint, and yes, we will make sure that the PowerPoint and the recording comes with the, we'll send a follow-up with all of the information and a summary to all of our registrants and attendees. So this one, I like this one. This one's made it to the top. If we are rounding by video or phone, should we do anything differently?
Yeah, you know, I think it, just like in rounding in general, if there's something very specific that's going on, so I just gave you the general questions of rounding, and when I think of rounding, it's always a couple of things. One is we start with the positive, something about working well, but it could be very specific to something that you have that's a task at hand. We were doing X yesterday, and when we were doing that, you know, what worked for you? And then it's looking at what got in your way, what's getting in your way, or what are the barriers that's not allowing us to accomplish that, or allowing you to do the things that you need to do. I always ask, I love the question, how can I be helpful regardless of what it is? And then making sure that we end with reward and recognizing somebody who's been helpful to them. You know, so you can take those rounding questions and put them very specifically to the content area that's most meaningful to you. Or if you're addressing people's anxiety, you can build those questions around, you know, what their anxieties are. So have it's what, you know, what Joanne Sternke, you know, speaks from the stage, it's freedom within the fences, you know, so there's a fence in terms of the way that we structure the flow of those questions, but there's freedom in the way that we build the content and the specificity to how we ask those questions, and so that they're not stale, so that they're meaningful, and that people understand why those questions are significant.
Awesome. Oh, okay. Sometimes my huddles start turning into dump sessions or things that bring everyone else down. How do you steer away from things like that?
Yeah, you know, Mandy, if you'll flip back to, for a few minutes, if you'll just flip back to the agenda, if you look at that agenda, and you'll have this, we'll send this out to you all so you can at least look at this format. There are times on the agenda, and I didn't go into the detail in the conversation, but I put times on each of the segments. And even if you look at the sub questions, it's what's up in the next 24 hours, 15 seconds per team lead. So first of all, this is very specific toward team leads reporting out. So it's not everybody reporting out on something, but it's really the team lead reporting out on what the key activities are going to be. And you have 15 seconds to do that. You have 30 seconds to do your daily metrics, and you have 90 seconds to talk about where you're getting stuck. And so there's the timing that goes along with each of these agenda items becomes extremely significant. And our ability as the person leading that team to keep people on those time limits becomes extremely important. So if it moves into another conversation, we can kind of say, time out. This is not the purpose of this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is really to get to these particular outcomes based on what we do on a daily basis. More than happy to connect with you about things that are causing you anxiety or things that you want to talk about in a different way, but we're going to use another platform to do that. But I really want to stick with this outcome for the benefit of the team, so that we're trying to get to the things that are most significant to us each and every day. So it's that leadership discipline of the person who's leading the huddle that keeps that discipline in focus with what's allowed and what's kind of not allowed for this meeting. I hope that's helpful.
I think it is, and I think this, or we have another question that kind of aligns to that a little bit, but more in tune with if you get to the part where you are stuck, that at 90 seconds of where you're stuck and the group is willing to brainstorm on a solution, would that work too?
Yeah.
And maybe, yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I think that's right. Where are you stuck? So we've had we had a couple of places on our team, in a certain area where we've been stuck, and we've identified those areas last week where we were stuck, but we identified the area that we were stuck. And then it's the responsibility, and for me, this last week, it was my responsibility then to do the follow-up with that team, that sub team, to really dig deeper into a conversation just about where they're stuck. So that problem solving, so then we're moving into a different type of meeting, which is a problem solving meeting. And I did a podcast, can't remember the number of it, Casey would know at some point, but I did a podcast on problem solving meetings. And so, then we're moving into a different type of meeting, and it's an important one, and we need to give people an opportunity to provide that deeper feedback on where we're stuck. But right now we're just identifying those areas so that we know how to have those, so that we know where to have those conversations. This is identification, bring it to another problem solving meeting, and let's dig deeper into it. If as long as if there's an issue where somebody continues to bring up a problem, and it's a problem after problem after problem, and the person can't get off the problem, that's another issue in and of itself. But I'm just talking about true issues of how we're digging deeper into solving problems that are real problems to get us into a productive way.
Okay. Is there a need for more team meetings that are not huddles during virtual work?
I think so I am leaning now toward more touch points, more rather than fewer. So what I've learned, and again, just my learning and my continued learning is that if I had a meeting once a month, I probably need to do it every other week. If I had a touch point once a week, I might need to do it twice a week. If I did rounding once a month, I might need to do it every 2 weeks. So I've found that I need to double down on that, at least where we are right now, to make sure that we're doing the right amount of touch points with people to keep that positive momentum going to achieve our goals. So I'm leaning toward we need to do more than what we normally do, and then manage that within the time that we have.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question, and then what we can do there's a few additional questions, we can package those together and maybe provide some answers in our follow-up. I do have one more here, which is, how do you best support staff who are not tech savvy?
Yeah. So I think the key there is we've got two jobs. One is to do all the things that we talked about today, and the other is where we have deficiencies with technology skills. We've got to begin to integrate those into our daily work. So in other words, Mandy, I'm thinking about, we have access to Microsoft Teams, and we know that we've needed to shift to that in a collaborative environment, but we've not necessarily done that yet. But what we know is we need to do that pretty quickly, because it's going to make us better. Right now, that's answering that question a little bit differently. But what we also know is we've got to schedule time for that in our day to make that a priority at some point. And I think that's wherever we have people who have are lacking in technology skills, we probably need to develop a priority for how we help them get up to speed, and determine what's the most important thing they need, and how can we get that to them as quickly as we can, and how do we build that training and development for them in our daily practice, so that we're making sure we prioritize that for the individuals there. They've got to have that in order to be connected. If they're not connected, if they're not able to be connected to technology like we're using right now, I just always land on, we can talk to each other on the phone. So it's better to talk to each other and have a human connection, not email necessarily, but a human connection with the phone, than no connection at all.
Wonderful. And we have officially hit our 30-minute mark. We do have a few additional questions, and we can package those together and kind of put some ideas together. We're going to share out the ideas, the question and answer, as well as all of the resources that we talked about in a couple of additional. I'll try to get our hands on that podcast episode too around problem solving meetings.
Okay, that sounds great. And I really appreciated the time today. I hope that it was helpful to you all. And if you have any additional questions, you can always shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you for spending your 30 minutes of your day with us today. Thanks so much.